If you've been paying attention to Western media this weekend, and if you have a long memory, you might have become aware of some scarily familiar framing. This was Israeli ambassador to the UK, Sipi Hotovely, appearing on GB News.
This is exactly the difference between Israel and Iran. Israel is targeting only the military targets, while Iran is aiming to hurt our civilians, our people. Look, yesterday I was devastated really to hear about a mother and a daughter that got killed in one of our cities in the north. And then we heard about more casualties being caused and more children that got killed yesterday from Iran's attack. You know, my own parents, they live in a city that was attacked yesterday by the ballistic missiles of Iran. And I want everyone who are listening to us, whether you are in Manchester, in Liverpool or in London, to know Iran developed a ballistic missile program that can get to London, that can hurt your communities. We could have seen the same damage happening in Europe. And this is part of, I mean, why should a regime that is kilometers away, thousands of kilometers away, should develop a nuclear program together with a ballistic missile program with a range to go all the way to Europe?
Now, those claims went completely unchallenged by Camilla Tominey, and they're completely false. So back in January, the Telegraph reported that Iran was secretly building missiles that could hit Europe. That article was based on leaks from the National Council of Resistance of Iran, an anti-regime organization based in Paris. But even those reports only claim that a missile capable of traveling 3,000 kilometers was being developed, a good 2,000 kilometers too short to reach London. And the point of Hotovely's remarks isn't her great fear for London's safety, though. It's about striking fear into the hearts of the British public and paving the way for British support for Israel's war in Iran. And we've seen all of this before.
Any country on the face of the earth with an active intelligence program knows that Iraq has weapons of mass destruction,
which could be activated within 45 minutes, including against his own Shia population.
The choice is his. And if he does not disarm, the United States of America will lead a coalition and disarm him in the name of peace.
That was Donald Rumsfeld, Tony Blair, and George W. Bush making the bogus case for regime change in Iraq. And that's, of course, a war that's thought to have killed up to 1 million people. And I suppose if you sort of count the chaos it caused in the region, potentially many more. Hotovely's message of imminent nuclear threat to Europe was also echoed by Israel's former Prime Minister Naftali Bennett, who posted this.
This morning, at 8:42 Paris time, a nuclear bomb was dropped on French territory in the southeast, in the area of the city of Lyon. Military sources confirm this was a direct attack by the Iranian regime.
Israel is saving the world from a nuclear Iran.
It's completely batshit, right? The really, I mean, obviously, it's an obvious thing to say, but there is an element of being completely gaslit when a regime that has a secret nuclear weapons program, which everyone knows but they won't admit, is warning us about a country that doesn't yet have nuclear weapons and might not even be trying to get them in the first place. And there's the idea of sort of mutually assured destruction was the idea that if you've got great powers with nuclear weapons, they're less likely to go to war, obviously, because you can cause so much damage with a nuke that it's not going to be in either one's interest to do so. And for some reason, in the Middle East, we've decided that it's really good for only one country to have nuclear weapons, which is Israel. It means Israel can do whatever they want without any consequences in the region because they're the only one with nukes. Right? Why, if Iran got nukes, would mutually assured destruction not at that point come into play? And then maybe war between Israel and Iran would be less likely. Now, obviously, you know, from a sort of objective, neutral perspective, in a way, the fewer countries who have nuclear weapons, the better, because the more countries that have nuclear weapons, that's the greater chance of accidents. But the Israelis cannot say, we are protecting you from a belligerent state having nuclear weapons. You are the belligerent state with nuclear weapons. In an interview with Fox News, Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu also gave American audiences the sense of a domestic risk posed by Iran.
They have plans to develop intercontinental ballistic missiles. Right now, 8,000 kilometers, very soon, just add a little distance, and they can reach the eastern seaboard of the United States. These people who chant death to America, try to assassinate President Trump twice, killed 241 of your Marines in Beirut, killed and injured thousands of American soldiers in Afghanistan and Iraq, try to bomb a restaurant in Washington, D.C., chant death to America, burn the American flag. Do you want these people to have nuclear weapons and the means to deliver them to your cities? Of course not.
Yeah.
So we're defending ourselves, but we're also defending the world.
Now, that claim that Iran was behind two assassination attempts on Donald Trump is pretty bizarre, and it seemed to fall apart under even the gentlest of journalistic probing.
You just said Iran tried to assassinate President Trump twice. Do you have intel that the assassination attempts on President Trump were directly from Iran?
Through proxies, yes. Through their intel, yes. They want to kill him. Look, he's enemy number one. He's a decisive leader. He never took the path that others took to try to bargain with him in a way that is weak, giving them basically a pathway to enrich uranium, which means a pathway to the bomb, padding it with billions and billions of dollars. He took up this fake agreement and basically tore it up. He killed Qasem Soleimani. He made it very clear, including now, you cannot have a nuclear weapon, which means you cannot enrich. He's been very forceful. So for them, he's enemy number one.
We've got the intel via proxies. I mean, then he just makes an argument that Iran have reason not to like Donald Trump. And boy, do Iran have a lot of reasons not to like Donald Trump, right? Iran signed in good faith a nuclear agreement with Obama. When people say there is a threat of Iran getting nuclear weapons, if that is the case, the only reason it is the case is because Donald Trump ripped up a nuclear agreement that was working perfectly fine. So Iran, in good faith, and actually there was lots of division in Iranian society about this. It was sort of a big win for, I suppose, the moderates, who had to exert a lot of political capital to get this agreement across the line. And then a new American president comes in, it's completely ripped up. The most aggressive sanctions sort of ever imposed on the country, collapsing the economy. And now, suddenly they're the enemy because they restarted their nuclear program when it was the Americans that ended the deal that would have controlled it. Even so, however ridiculous what Netanyahu is putting forward, the hawks in the United States are beginning to gather. This was Republican Senator Ted Cruz on Fox News.
Senator, do you want to see regime change? Do you think that happens soon? And what would the future look like in that regard?
Look, I think it is very much in the interest of America to see regime change. I don't think there's any redeeming the Ayatollah. He is filled with hatred.
2003 all over again. Terrifying stuff. When has regime change gone well? Even if you don't like the Ayatollah, when has regime change gone well? I suppose Israel much prefers having a failed state with an endless civil war and millions of people dying than having a united, coherent state that wants to challenge Israel, right? So you point to Libya, you point to Iraq, you point to Syria. That's not going to be persuasive to Israel because they're like, oh, that's great. We prefer having these failed states. Failed states are a block to Arab unity. Obviously, Iran, not an Arab state, but a block to unity among our enemies. Others in the media have been lining up the preferred new regime in Iran. So on Sunday, you can't make this up, the BBC's Laura Koonsberg interviewed Reza Pahlavi, the son of the deposed Shah of Iran, and perhaps a contender, I don't know, for the country's leadership if the West does manage to pursue and achieve regime change. Here's how she introduced him.
The brutal regime in Iran is not, of course, the same as the Iranian people. Opposition in that country has been repressed for many years. Women forced to cover their hair, political critics jailed, and same-sex relationships banned, while the economy is in terrible shape. You might remember back in 2022, the frustrations of many thousands of people who took to the streets were met with force. So might this be a moment for those who want to overturn the regime? Reza Pahlavi is the son of the former Shah of Iran, and he told us this morning it's time for the population to rise up.
We have to be clear, the Iranian government does not represent the Iranian people. This is an oppressive, undemocratic regime. Who does represent the Iranian people? The son of the Shah. We'll get on the son of the Shah. He's the person who can tell us what Iranians really think. He went on to say something that I think no Iranian will agree with. Well, not many of them, which is that it's actually great that Israel is bombing us because maybe that will bring forward the collapse of the regime. So obviously people I follow on Twitter sort of from all different sides of this debate. So people who are, supportive of the opposition in Iran saying this is, even for this guy's sort of self-interest, going on TV and saying it's great that Israel is bombing Iran is not going to help you get back to power. Ash, Are you getting some deja vu when it comes to the coverage of this conflict and the run up to the Iraq War?
It is difficult to think of a class of more historically ignorant people than Westminster's elite journalists. Getting the son of the Shah of Iran onto your Sunday morning politics show would be a bit like getting a descendant of General Pinochet on to talk about how awful the state of modern Chile is. Because for all of the political repression and religious repression of the Iranian Republic, what was going on under the Shah was industrial, systematized torture, executions. The secret police, which is abbreviated as SAVAK under the Shah, were found by the Federation of American Scientists to have regularly used forms of torture that would really not be out of place, in Machiavelli's worst imagination. I mean, really incredibly brutal stuff. And this, of course, was the autocratic dictator who was backed by the West in order to overthrow a democratically elected leader, Mossadegh, who wanted to nationalize Iranian oil. So it's astonishing that any journalist would invite the son of the Shah on as a sort of lost leader, the king waiting over the water. But I think that shows you just how particularly bad our media class are when they're talking about foreign affairs and geopolitics. I mean, it really is just like the hand of MI6 is wedged up there, puppeteering the whole thing. Like it's an absolute joke. When it comes to comparisons with the Iraq War, I mean, yes and no. The most significant departure from the build up to the Iraq War is that there was a build up to the Iraq War. Instead, what we're seeing now is war first and putting the case for it afterwards. So, yes, there's a repetition of the themes of weapons of mass destruction. It is a complete absurdity that Netanyahu is saying, oh, well, Iran were just months away from a nuclear weapon. He's been saying that Iran are months away from a nuclear weapon for decades. I'm old enough to remember him showing up at the UN in 2012, holding up this sort of big cartoon bomb and saying that Iran were about, 90% of the way there. So this has been something that Netanyahu has been talking about for literally decades. Only a few weeks ago, you had Tulsi Gabbard presenting the view of the US intelligence community saying that Iran are not making a bomb. So this is it looks to be a complete fabrication, or at least to be a real outlier from what's even coming from the American intelligence community. But you wouldn't know that. You wouldn't know that if you listen to a lot of UK media. I mean, it's ridiculous even to listen to the words of the likes of Naftali Bennett, who called this war a preemptive defensive action. Well, if a defensive action is preemptive, by definition, it's no longer defensive, right? It is offensive. That is the literal meaning of the word offensive. And I think that in a way, the sort of newspeak element of it, the inherent contradiction, that tells its own story to British audiences. But the lightness with which regime change is being discussed, when it's so clearly a discussion which is being led by Israel's action. So Israel advances into previously unthought of territory, and then the arguments come in behind it. I mean, regime change in a country of over 90 million people, with an army which is hundreds of thousands strong and also has various, religious paramilitaries as well, is not it's no small feat. I mean, you couldn't even really get regime change in Afghanistan, which had a far less developed military industrial complex and state and army than Iran ever have. I mean, look at what creating a failed state in Iraq did. I mean, it completely destabilized the region and led to forms of terrorism on European soil, which were completely brutal. If there's one, surefire sign of a bad idea, it's when the Westminster political class are in agreement about something. And so the minute they all start talking about Iranian regime change as though it's as simple as, repainting your living room, that we're in for a historic fuck up of epic proportions.
I mean, even framing it as, sort of like, Laura, because, the Iranian regime, that they don't represent the Iranian people. So when we're condemning what Iran is doing, we shouldn't be condemning the whole Iranian people, just the terrible tyrannical government. They're the ones getting bombed, right? Israel started the war. Like the flip whereby everyone is reporting this as if Iran is the aggressor and Israel is the attacked. All European leaders and American leaders are saying Israel has a right to self-defense. They started it. They literally bombed Iran, and then Iran responded. And that is not to, I don't have very strong opinions about the Iranian regime. I'm not an expert. I imagine their politics don't accord with mine. But to posit the country that got bombed as the aggressor and saying, when we're condemning Iran, we're not condemning their people. We're going to be really reasonable here. It's not the Iranian people we have a problem with. It's their very, very aggressive leaders who we do. They got bombed. Ash, I mean, it's bizarre, isn't it? And I suppose it is on national security. Something does just sort of come into effect whereby Israel is our ally. So it's natural and normal that they have a nuclear bomb, even though the idea that they are the restraining force in the Middle East is kind of the most ridiculous idea I can possibly imagine. This is a country that is committing genocide. Why are we trusting them with the nukes and not Iran? There is something about it which is, it feels weird, doesn't it? It does feel like you're constantly just being gaslit the moment something happens in the Middle East like this.
I mean, even the very morning after Israel's first aerial attacks on Tehran, the language of, surgical, precise targeting, military infrastructure, the means by which they assassinated Iranian nuclear scientists and, the army's top brass, it was by bombing whole apartment blocks. And this is how, Israel carries out its assassinations. It's not snipers, it's not poison pens. It's blowing up an entire apartment block and just hoping that amongst the civilians, the women, the children, that the marked man is also killed. And if you were Iranian, no matter how forthright your opposition to the regime may be, no matter how much you may loathe, religious theocracy, you're probably going to hate the foreign invader more. It's just a natural way people feel, which is okay. I've got these religious theocrats dictating my life, but they're not blowing up the apartment block where I live with my wife and kids. So this fantasy that the Iranian people are going to rise up because they've been bombed into democracy, it's never worked before. Why on earth would it work now?
I mean, I agree. Let's go on to our next story. Also, that's not what any of these people are interested in doing. Even to sort of, I'm not saying you were suggesting this, Ash, but even to say sort of like, oh, if Israel are hoping to bomb Iran into a democracy, they're going to fail. Israel wants Iran to be a failed state. Right, that is its aim here. It wants Iran it wants every single state in West Asia to be a failed state, apart from Israel, so that Israel can say, not only are we the only democracy in the Middle East, even though they're an apartheid nation that doesn't allow half the population to vote for the government that rules over them on the basis of their ethnicity, right? Because they're in the West Bank or Gaza. I mean, we could go on about this for ages.